Hi everyone, my name is Jessie Holmes and today I am going to be going over the components of what is known as Math Workshop, or for some people might be familiar with calling it Math Rotations. So I'm going to start off with kind of showing you what that time looks like when you're conducting a math rotation. I think of it as being similar to that of Reader's Workshop and Writer's Workshop, except with the math workshop, you're starting up with a number sense routine or what might be like a math warm up for the first 10 minutes of your lesson. Then you jump into a whole group mini lesson, just like you normally do with Readers and Writers Workshop. And this is something that is really short and sweet with the whole group, about 10 minutes in time. Then the largest component of Math Workshop is working in a small group math rotation. Typically, there is also the word math being an acronym that represents each station that the students rotate through, which we will go into more depth later. And then finally, having a share out or some type of wrap up and reflection, again, as a whole group for about 5 to 10 minutes. And that comprises our whole entire time of math workshop. Here's another example of a daily math routine type of schedule. Starting off the day again with a warm up of some time or what we know as a number sense. Moving into that mini lesson, again, it is 10 minutes max where you're introducing and practicing a math skill. That small group rotation, and I had mentioned earlier about the math standing for an acronym. So here you can see that we have M, meet with the teacher, A, at your seat, T for technology, and H for hands-on. And then finally kind of regrouping, reviewing, and wrapping up and reflecting upon the lesson that was taught. So you might be more familiar with this sort of math workshop model. This is the one that the district has adopted that you may have seen elsewhere. So I'm going to be focusing more on the green and the orange. I typically do this 3 days a week in my classroom, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. There's no rhyme or reason to what you choose. It's what works best for you, your students, and just your classroom in general. All three of these are different types of models that you can work with. But like I said, I'm going to focus on the green and orange because that's typically what I've been implementing in my classroom. What we're going to start off with first is doing number sense routines, because if you notice across the board in all of these, every single one of them starts with that number sense routine. So number sense routines is something that's going to be 5 to 10 minutes in length. It's going to be shorter than your actual mini lesson component. Some examples of number sense routines are splat math, which one doesn't belong, quick images, choral counting, number of the day, and number talk. All of these are easy to find online, and these aren't the only options for a number sense routine. These are just more the ones that I use regularly within my own classroom. So we're going to look at splat math. And as you can see over here, these are PowerPoints. So these are actually available online if you search splat math. So you're able to find them, which is great that you don't have to go and recreate the wheel with these. They start off with dots that the kids are counting. They're figuring out how many dots there are total, and then suddenly you click the next slide and there is a splat that covers a chunk of the dots, and the students have to use their mathematical reasoning and their skills to be able to figure out how many the dot has covered. And so we're going to listen to first one of my students explaining their mathematical reasoning. Is your mathematician talk? So that video is from my students from the very beginning of the year when we first introduced our number sense routines. And in there, you'll see that we're using our math language. He's using words like his solution is, and then he's throwing in the because we talk about wanting to cite or reference our evidence. What is our proof for our answer that we're coming up with? So next, what we're going to talk about is the focus lesson, or what we know as a mini lesson. So in our mini lesson, each day students are going to participate in a 5 to 10 minute maximum lesson, during which we introduce new math content to them. This is one of the 2 very brief times when all the students are working on the same activity simultaneously. I typically pull from my math expression lessons and come up with a clear teaching point for this mini lesson, and then my rotations are based around the lesson that I've chosen. I also like to have anchor charts, and on those anchor charts, I might be introducing, like I said, new math content. Sometimes it's even just simply a strategy that I'm introducing to them. And in the case of this anchor chart of mine, we were working on subtraction without regrouping, and I was introducing to them how to use base 10 models with subtraction. And then we went into math rotations where we got to practice those skills. So on here, I have another focus lesson. This one's much later in the year with the students, where we are all working together at the carpet for 5 to 10 minutes, and I'm introducing a new math skill to them having to do with word problems and measurement. All right, boys and girls, so we're going to do one. I need to hear that click. I don't need any distractions right now. Thank you. We're going to be looking at this word problem together today. So I have Carl draws a line segment that is 18 centimeters long. Then he makes it 14 centimeters longer. How long is the line segment now? So before we get started, let's think about what kind of math we're using. And if you need any help, we can turn around and look at our wall to see if there's any key words that helps us to figure out what kind of math we're. So again, in the mini lesson component, this is something that's typically 5 to 10 minutes in length. This is done as whole group. I typically conduct mine at the carpet. And in this case, for this lesson in particular, we were working with word problems and addition and subtraction with measurement and length, and using different units before I sent them on to do their math rotation for the day. So next, what we're going to move into is the actual learning station component. This is the math acronym of Meet with the Teacher, At Your Seat, Technology, and Hands-On component. So immediately following their focus lesson for the day, or their mini lesson, students get to have an extended work session where they practice the new math skills that were taught that day, and that's typically done with me. They build their problem solving skills by solving performance tasks. They will get hands-on math practice. They can even work on project-based learning, complete assessments, or using technology to practice math skills, and then getting to have differentiated instruction from me in a much smaller group setting. Now, typically how I organize my groupings, I conduct an assessment beforehand to place them into their groups so that I'm able to differentiate them based on their needs for that unit or that specific lesson. So our first one is Meet with the Teacher. So I usually call that Meet with Miss Holmes, and that's where I am giving them differentiated instruction, and we're working on the skills needed for that particular group, focusing on that lesson for the day. Now the next one is our at the seat work. So students work to build their math reasoning. They model and they problem solve in this area here. This is a really perfect area where you want the students to be able to work on something that you've already been working on. This is something that they can do independently at their table spot. This isn't something that they would need you in order to complete. So as you can see in my picture here, in this particular math rotation of At Your Seat, they're working from their workbook. So we've introduced new skill. I've probably gone over a couple of the math problems, so now they should be able to independently complete a workbook page or two from their math workbook. Other times for the At Your Seat, I try and make it fun. It might be addition and subtraction, coloring page. It could even comprise of a CGI problem that they're doing. But either way, this should be something that they know how to do without my help. Then our next part is the technology. So students are building their math fact fluency. They're using specific math websites or apps. So they may be using something like Extra Math or even just Gigi. I also use Solve Me Mobiles and even sometimes an activity for them to complete on Seesaw. So this is something that's done on their iPads, whether it's the use through an app that we already have on our iPad or an activity that I've created for them to complete and post. So here's some examples here. If you see, I have students on Gigi for one time of our technology math rotation. They might be completing their Extra Math, working on their math fact fluency. It could be completing a CGI problem through the use of an app that I use called Nearpod, or posting their mathematical reasoning onto Seesaw. Now the H is for hands-on. So still students are building their math reasoning and fact fluency as they play math games. So I think of it as centers. It's very hands-on. It provides the students with things like game cards. It really gets them engaged. They're really independent at it. And this is sometimes something I also teach to them whole group before I send them off to do these tasks in the smaller group. So they might be using dice to complete an activity or a game, for example. Here I have some videos of my math workshop in action. So you'll get to see some of my students at the meet with teacher, or they might be doing the hands-on for theirs. So you'll kind of get to see what's going on. As you can see, they're working independently, but within their small group, and they have a designated location that they are working at to complete their activity. And the activity is based upon my teaching point for the day. And if you also notice, the students are extremely engaged in the activities or lessons that they are doing at their designated rotation spot. So then this brings us to the wrapping up of a math rotation or math workshop, the student reflection part. So this is an anchor chart that I typically refer to daily with them. How did you grow as a mathematician today? And we focus on one of the questions, but this can also be done through a think, pair, share, an exit ticket, whiteboards, or just simply a whole class discussion if you wanted. Students kind of take a moment to reflect on the math progress made that day, and they share their thoughts either verbally or in writing. And this is typically the second time in the entire math workshop model where the whole class is together working on the same thing simultaneously. And that is it for my math workshop, and hopefully you've learned something or have a takeaway that you're able to use in your classroom and possibly implement soon. Thank you.